to sing those songs together. What a joy that is. Thank you. Sermon this morning is what baseball players, I think, call the change-up pitch. It's a little different than the ordinary thing I do. Whether that's good or bad, that's up for others to judge. But the handout is very different than what you're used to. It is not a fill-in-the-blank outline. It's just kind of a summary sheet, and you can take notes on that or whatever. So if you're used to filling in the blanks and getting chocolate at the back, so the story is if you come to the back and say, I listened to the sermon, you can have one chocolate. If you come to the back and say, great, you're a great, great guy, then you get 2 chocolates. Okay, so I will be back with the chocolates. Well, flattery is always appropriate. It's always useful. If you were following along with the reading earlier in John 13, you might want to keep your Bibles open or reopen your Bibles to that point. The opening of the sermon this morning is a story about Stanley Shipp. And many of you older people remember Stanley. Some of you younger, you've never heard of him. But Stanley was a great preacher, just a little bit older than me. And although Stanley was a great preacher, he had a skill even greater than preaching. Stanley was a man who could walk up to a total stranger and soon having him discussing the gospel. He was a man who had a rare talent for that, and I've known few people who could do it any better. So this is a story that involves something that happened to Brother Stanley. And you've probably had a similar experience to this. You go to catch a plane and nothing goes right. And 2.5 hours later, you've been taken off the plane and put back on the plane and taken off the plane and back on the plane, and you're hot and you're tired and you're thirsty and you're hungry, and everybody is grouchy as they can be. Well, this exactly happened to Stanley one day, and there was one man who was just one row ahead of Stanley who was very grouchy with the assistant. He said to her, I want an aisle seat. I always have an aisle seat. And she looked at his ticket and said, well, I'm sorry, sir, you got a middle seat and the plane is full. I have no aisle seat that I can give you. I always get an aisle seat. Stanley Shipp, who was sitting behind him, stood up and says, well, you can have my aisle seat. I don't want your aisle seat. I want my aisle seat. And the man, this was back in the day when all of us men wore coats and ties when we flew. He took off his suit coat, crumpled it up like this, threw it in the overhead bin and slammed it shut. Sat down in the middle like this. Well, in a few moments, quietness, Stanley Shipp got up, quietly opened the overhead bin, took out the crumpled up coat, folded it neatly as he possibly could, and placed it gently in the overhead rack and gently shut it down. Stanley never said a word, sat back down. In a few minutes, the grouchy, angry man turned around and says, what do you do for a living? And Stanley says, I teach people how to live. And this man said, start teaching. And a man behind him said, me too. Well, it's a story about relationships and how we build them and how we break them that I think ties in with that. We all want better relationships, because the fact is it's not making a big money or starting a big company that makes us successful in the long term. It's the relationships we build with one another and, of course, with the Lord. Those relationships are the important things. But we're often frustrated, tired, depressed by failure in relationships. We look around us and we see so many broken relationships between mates, between parents and children, races, even broken relationships between nations and them threatening each other and so forth. And we want to put things right, but we just don't know how. And how many of us have said, if I just knew how to do it, I would like to get closer to my family and my friends and the people I work with. But I just don't know how to make things better. Well, that situation has just gotten worse, because we live in an age, literally an age of deconstruction, where the culture is destroying a lot of the foundations that have been there for ages. And it's an age when we're post-truth. That is, we are in an age where you have your truth, I have my truth. There is no truth. It's all what I feel about things. And to make it all worse, every lie, every bit of gossip, every innuendo, every nasty remark that you can imagine is spread around the world at the speed of light. And so the broken relationships probably are as bad or worse than they ever have been. So all of us, certainly me, we all need someone to teach us how to live. Stanley learned some things about how to live. And the Bible has a great deal to say about how to live. God can teach us how to live if we're willing to let Him. So this morning I want to talk about two principles, not three, but two principles that I think are perhaps the most important things in building relationships. And they are possibly the most important things about those subjects that I have ever learned. And I don't claim to be perfect in doing these every time, but they are always my goals. I'm thoroughly convinced if we know how to do these two principles, our lives and our relationships will be better. Okay, principle number one. Do the right thing, whether anyone else does the right thing or not. Do the right thing first without waiting for anyone else to do it. And do it even if it seems like I get the short end of the stick. It's not fair to me. Always do the right thing and do it first. This is a fundamental characteristic of Jesus. I didn't get this out of a psychology book. I see it right in the life of Jesus. And if we live the way He lived, our relationships will be better. Now, we've read a very familiar passage from John the 13th chapter about the Last Supper. I know you all know it. I'm not going to spend a lot of time retelling the story. The story is they're there to eat this great meal with Jesus, and there's something that needed to be done. The problem is no one wants to do it. Maybe some of them are wondering, well, why hasn't somebody volunteered to wash the feet? Why is this not happening? So in my imagination, and it's no more perfect than that, I've written down some thoughts that might be going through the minds of the apostles as they all are reclining at table, but none of them are washing the feet that need to be done. One of them is saying, well, it's not my turn. Another apostle is thinking, Thomas never takes his turn. It's not fair that Thomas never washes feet. That's just not right. Another one of the apostles is thinking perhaps, I am absolutely irritated with Judas, and I'm not washing his feet. Fact is, I'm not washing anyone's feet. Another apostle is thinking, well, if someone else will volunteer, I'll volunteer to help. Okay. Another apostle is saying, I'm too tired. Let Peter do it. I like that one. Another one is thinking, washing feet is a work of slaves. I've got more important things to do. Now, here's a little-known tidbit, and you can treasure this, and you've heard it nowhere else. One of the apostles actually had grown up in Southern California. And so this apostle is saying, can't we just hire a service to do this? I mean, if we hire a service and we get them scheduled regularly, we can get a good deal on it. Let's hire a service to do it. And the chairman of the apostles for that month says, don't we have a deacon who's in charge of that? All right, I hope you got a kick out of that, but it's not all far from the way we think. And we know how the story goes. We have 12 men who've been with Jesus for 3 years, and none of them does the job that needs to be done. So the King of Kings and Lord of Lords gets on a towel and washes their feet. Hours later, he is on the cross. And around him, there's a crowd of people who need grace about as much as any people in the whole history of the world have needed grace. There are people there to watch the show, and there are people there who hours before were shouting, crucify Jesus and give us Barabbas. And Jesus does the right thing first. He says, what? Father, forgive them. They don't even have a clue what they're doing. You see, Jesus does the right thing, and He does it first. This ties in very well with something He taught. And it's not identical, but they go together. Jesus says, if you remember that your brother has something against you, stop, go, and make things right. Don't wait for your brother. What do we do? Say, well, he's mad at me. He needs to come and talk to me about it. That's the way we tend to think. But Jesus says we would instead do something like, brother, it sounds like you might be upset with me. Have I been acting like a jerk? Now here's the key. What can I do to make it better? Not, here's all the bad things you've done to irritate me. What can I do to make it better? We tend to do the opposite. We tend to say, I will do something if someone else does something first. I will say I'm sorry if you say you're sorry first. If you do your part, well, I'll do mine. Matter of fact is, I'll scratch your back, but only if you what? Scratch my back first, all right? And in marriages and families and relationships, if my wife, my kids, my whatever, if you get your life straightened out, then I'll turn my life around too. And so we often do that, human beings, and sometimes we do kind of the opposite of that. We blame others for our reactions and our actions, and that makes us reactors instead of actors. So we don't accept responsibility for what we do, and we go through life saying, he made me mad, so this is what I said. She made me do it. I wouldn't have done it, but she made me do it. So reactors go through life saying, I would have, but he did this or she said that. And only if she hadn't, then I would have. And none of those are doing the right thing and doing it first. Stephen Covey wrote one of the great non-biblical books of the last umpteen years called 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. He called this kind of thinking being proactive. And he says it is the most basic habit of highly effective people. And he's talking in a business environment, but this thing works in schools and churches and anywhere. He says proactive people don't wait for things to happen. They go out and do the things that need doing. He says proactive people don't make excuses about what others are doing or what others are not doing. They just go out and do it. And Covey, looking at businesses, and he's speaks to businesses all over the world, or did, he says it makes a night and day difference in the effectiveness of people. He said, now, I'm not talking about a 20 to 50% improvement. It's more like 500% plus improvement if you have people that go out and just do the right thing. The undeniable fact, we cannot choose what happens to us, and bad things will happen to good people in this world, and other people will hurt us in this world. And we cannot stop that from happening, but we can choose to do the right things. We can react to what others do and blame them for our problems, or we can act, we can proact, doing the right things first, whether anyone else does or not. There's a young man with a story we love to tell. He had a little problem. His dad showed favoritism toward him, and because of that, his brothers hated him. And they had an opportunity, and they decided to kill him. And so they threw him down in a well, and then one of the boys, kind of having a tiny bit of a soft heart, says, oh, let's don't kill him. Let's sell him into slavery instead. He's safe. Thanks a lot. So Joseph, of course, you know the story. He ends up down in Egyptian prison. He's there he didn't deserve to be in the Egyptian prison. Fact is, he did everything possible to avoid immorality, but he's still in that prison. But as a young man, he's always determined to do the right thing first. And in the end, God blessed him and used him. One of the most moving scenes of the Bible is in Genesis, the 45th chapter, when Joseph, who always keeps doing the right thing and the godly thing, is now prime minister of Egypt, probably the second most powerful man in the world. And his brothers and family are hungry, and the brothers all stand before him, not recognizing him. Now, Joseph, as prime minister, I don't know if he's thinking this or not, but the fact is that Joseph can have the guards take their swords and kill every one of those men right there in front of him. Joseph could have all those men thrown into prison and left there for the rest of their lives. Or Joseph could assign them to be tortured until they begged for death. But instead, the tears roll down Joseph's face, and he says, I'm your brother you sold into slavery. Joseph is a man who always tried to do the right thing and to do it first, and in the end, God blessed him and God used him. Maybe we're in a prayer group or a Bible study group or a church, and we're complaining. We're saying, there's no one around here who's very spiritual. Who's going to be spiritual in this group? Guess what? I could be the one who is. And I'm not saying those people aren't spiritual, but if that's the way you're feeling, we ought to be saying, how can I serve? Well, there's always objections to that kind of thinking. We say, but I just don't feel like doing it, right? I just don't feel like it. I'm just not into that. Or, it's not my gift. Now, there's fads that go through churches through the years, and this is not a bad fad, but it was a fad nevertheless some years back. Everyone should learn what your gift is, and then you should do whatever your gift is. That's what you should do. You know, if your gift is preaching, you should preach, but if it's something else, you do whatever. Let me tell you a little fact of 50 years in ministry, off and on. I can't tell you how many times I've done something which wasn't my gift at all, but no one was doing it. I was at Ina Road one time when one of my best friends died of a heart attack, the preacher, and I'm looking around saying, well, who's going to preach? Who's going to preach here? Neil just died of a heart attack. Who's going to preach? And then I looked in the mirror. I guess it must be me. We do things all the time, but are they our gift or they're not our gift? And we do them whether we feel like doing them or not. Now, when I say that, someone will say, but if I do things that I don't feel like doing, doesn't that make me a hypocrite? And that leads us to the second great principle of building and healing relationships. Now, the first one is, remember, do the right thing, always do the right thing, do it first, don't make excuses, etc. The second one is perhaps to me even more fundamental as far as me learning, because this was one I didn't understand until much later in life. The second great principle of relationships is act better than we feel. And we don't always do that. We say things like, when my wife treats me better, I'll feel better about her. And then I'll treat her better. That's what you called a self-defeating negative cycle. It never stops and nothing ever gets better. It won't change. So here's the insight that really made a difference in my life. Our feelings will never change. Our feelings will rarely change until our actions change first. Now, you see a little, not a graph, but see a little diagram in the middle of the notes there. If we want to change people's lives, there's three things we can work on. We can work on our actions, we can work on our thoughts, or we can work on our feelings. Those are basically the three parts that we all have to work with. So those are the things that we have to do. And what we learn is, if I work on any one of those, if I change my thinking, it affects those other parts. If I change my feeling, it affects the others. But the easiest one to deal with is not change my feelings, because guess what? Feelings aren't rational. And I'm sorry, I'm left-brained. I have to work on rational things. That's one of my gifts and also one of my disabilities, both ways. So a great thinker, I don't know who it was, but I learned it from Dr. Paul Faulkner. He says, it is easier to act your way into a better way of feeling than to feel your way into a better way of acting. This is one of the most important things I ever learned. It is easier to act yourself into a better way of feeling than to feel yourself into a better way of acting. So we do right things now, whether we feel like it or not. And when we begin to do right things, our own thinking and our own attitude change, and then God can have an opening to work on us. And James says, anyone then who knows the right thing to do and fails to do it commits sin. Even if I don't feel like it, James, even if you don't feel like it, we do it anyway because it's the right thing to do. And when I do it, after a while, my feelings may begin to change. Again, someone says, well, won't this make me a fake? I'm doing this from the wrong motives. Okay. Should I deny my feelings? No. Just don't let our feelings become our masters. I had a regular job, quote unquote, one way or another for close to 50 years. And you know what the worst thing that happened to me every single day of work? The alarm clock went off right next to the bed. And every day for all those years, I said, oh, please, I just need a little more time. I just need this a little bit more. But there was more time. I've got responsibilities. I don't feel like getting up. So here's what I did every day for 50 or so years. I threw one leg off the bed. And if nothing bad happened, I threw the other one off too and started getting ready to do what? The things that I had to do, whether I feel like doing them or not. I believe if I began to do the right things, it's very possible and likely that my heart will change. Now, I have very little experience with AA because I'm a non-drinker, but I know that one of the fundamental principles of AA, and I think this is absolutely correct, fake it what? Fake it till you make it. Okay, you don't feel like doing it, well, do it anyway. And after a while, it may very well be that your feelings will change as well. We don't always feel like coming to worship. We don't always feel like teaching a class. We don't always feel like making a call to someone who's depressed or needs help. I will tell you a little secret. You probably have never guessed this. In a lifetime of ministry, I didn't feel like preaching every Sunday. Some days you just don't feel good. And I didn't. So what do you do when you just don't feel like it? You put on those boots and go to work. You call in sick. Now, that's when, Tony, you call one of the elders and say, I can't come in. I have an eye problem today. You know the eye problem? I just can't see myself going to work today. No. I've had to do that on a few occasions, but not many. But in more recent years, I've also been there when the preacher called me and said, I'm sick and church starts in 20 minutes. Can you fill in? That's not necessarily the most fun thing to do either. So we don't always feel like doing the right things. But if we do it, the power of our own change and the power of God will begin to change our hearts. I believe that. Aristotle put it this way: we are what we repeatedly do. That's what we are, the things we keep on doing. Excellence, then, he says, is not an act but a habit. If we want to be loving and compassionate and really feel it, then we should go out and do the right things and see how we change and what God has to do. Now, time is almost gone, but I've got to tell you this story. This is another true story. A man came in to the preacher one day, pretty smart preacher, by the way, not me, because I'm not wise in this way. Came in the preacher, said, I just don't love my wife anymore. Now, that can mean a lot of different things. And we have people here in this auditorium who have degrees in counseling, and so they're smarter than I am about all this kind of thing. That can mean a lot of things. It could mean, though, that, well, go back to when you first saw the one. You walked into that crowded room, and you looked across that crowded room, and there she was. David, this happened to you and Joyce. I know it did. And you know it's the one. You know it's the one because there's a purple haze like over her head like this. And you hear violins softly playing. And out of nowhere, Andy Williams stops, not our Andy Williams, the other Andy Williams, but our Andy Williams could do it. He comes out and starts singing, Some Enchanted Evening, you know how the rest of that goes, okay? So the problem is, after 10 years or 20 years or 30 years of marriage, the violins have faded and the golden haze, the violet haze is gone. You've changed too many diapers and you've disciplined too many children and you've worked too many hours of overtime and you've had too many fusses over stupid things and you've had too many cars break down on the freeway and you had the roof leaking and you had no money to fix it. And all of those things that happen to all of us. And then we go and talk to the people at work and the people who think worldly. Well, they say, well, if all that is faded, well, change mates. Get a new model. That's what solves it. But the same thing happens again. The violet haze will fade there sooner, one time or another. So here's what the preacher said. The man says, I just don't love my wife anymore. And the wise preacher said, well, go home and love her then. Now you think about that, because what that is saying is love is a verb. Love is what we do even more than I feel. Teachers, love is getting up and going in that classroom and doing your absolute best for your kids when you want to be fishing down on the creek. That's what love is like. It's what we do, not the way we feel. If emotion is faded, go home and do the loving things. Okay, here's a absolute freebie, and this is another wonderful thing I learned. Maybe you don't know how to show love to your spouse. Here's a little exercise. Tell them, here's a sheet of paper. What I want you to do, wife or husband, either one, I want you to write down a list of 5 things that if I do them, it will make you feel loved. Now, these are all little things. It's not like take me to the Bahamas, buy me a diamond necklace. It's, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I agree. It absolutely does. It's things like put the tube on the toothpaste. Remember to take out the trash. It's don't forget to pick up the kids from whatever. It's all simple things you do. So now you know this is what makes her feel loved. It's not going to Rio for 2 weeks. It's those little things every day. And so you go home and do the things that make her feel loved. Oh, absolutely. Do it whether I feel like it or not, and watch my heart change, and perhaps hers as well. Do the right thing whether we want to or not. The idea is to cast ourselves into love's direction. And it may very well be that I will start to become what God wants me to become. 2 simple but profound principles to change my life and my relationships. Do the right thing. Do it first, whether anyone else is doing it or not. And secondly, change our feelings by first changing our actions. It's easier to act ourselves into a better way of feeling than to feel ourselves into a better way of acting. Try it. Try it as a Christian, doing the things, the loving things that God has taught us to do. Do those things and see if it doesn't change our life. Now, if you're outside of Christ, those things are practical principles. They will help. But if you're inside of Christ, then you have not only the power of our own efforts, but we have the power of God working within us. If you're here outside of Christ, or if you're here needing the prayers of the church, we have this invitation time. So if you're subject to that invitation, would you come?